Oh, what's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're watching a video titled Russia and China didn't help Iran. Why? Why? True, why? I want to know why. Let's see what this video is about.
It wasn't so very long ago that the Western world was trembling in its boots. Decades after the Cold War, from Ukraine to West Africa to the South China Sea, the US and Europe's longtime adversaries were all preparing for violent days ahead. At the time, they were called the Axis of Upheaval.
That video started so quickly, I thought that I didn't even start it from the beginning.
Four-way alignment between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, working together at unprecedented scale with America and its entire global alliance in their sights. But
Isn't North Korea helping out Iran right now? I don't know if that's correct. I think I saw that somewhere.
spin the clock forward to early March of 2026, and Iran is learning the hard way what the Axis of Upheaval was really worth. Right now, American and Israeli warplanes are laying waste to targets across the country, and a growing alignment of European and Middle Eastern powers agree. No matter what happens afterwards, the Iranian regime must go. Flashback to the Axis of Upheaval, and would expect to see a massive coordinated response with one of the world's largest economies in China and one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals in Russia rallying to the Ayatollah's defense. But the Ayatollah's dead. The tides have clearly turned against Iran on the international stage, and in Iran's ultimate moment of need, its allies were nowhere to be found. So let's start with the elephant in the room. The global axis of upheaval, as described by Western analysts through a fair portion of the mid-2020s, just doesn't exist. Although they might work together on a range of strategic pursuits, Russia and China are not formal allies, and neither of those nations have agreed to any alliance with Iran. Their interests generally cluster in the same direction, and those interests have led them to share military hardware, back each other up diplomatically, and otherwise support each other in...
So they're not like allied when it comes to like wars.
hardware, back each other up diplomatically, and otherwise support each other in deep and fascinating ways, but geopolitical collaboration and alliances, they ain't the same. Of course, geostrategy is a tricky thing, and just because two nations don't have, say, a mutual defense clause or a formal alliance on paper, that doesn't mean that they aren't working together in pursuit of a broader plan. In fact, as one Western defense expert put it for our Warfronts team recently, it would be fair to say that the level of alignment between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea today is considerably greater than the alignment between Japan, Germany, and Italy at the outbreak of World War II. So even though Russia, China, and Iran weren't formal allies before the United States and Israel began their current offensive, there was ample reason to wonder if that attack could be the moment that Russia and China drew their line in the sand. Alliance or no, an outside observer could argue that Moscow and Beijing regard Tehran as a vital strategic partner, or that if world powers are playing a constant real-life game of risk, that Iran has become the sort of ally they would do anything to protect. But as it turns out...
So, what I'm understanding, I don't know if I understood this correctly, but they weren't really allied. They're just helping each other out, which kind of make them allied. But they're also so important that you would think that they would come running to help Iran if something like this happened. But now that's not the case. And that's why we're questioning why. Am I right? I don't know.
Well, it's just not the case, is it? I mean, it's still early in the ongoing Iran conflict as of the time of writing, but when it comes to Russian or Chinese intervention, this is one of those times when we really don't feel the need to give a disclaimer on just how drastically the situation could change by the time this episode is released. If Russia and China were going to spring to Iran's defense and take an active role in this particular military conflict, well, suffice it to say, that would have happened already. But more to the point, the United States, Israel, and their international allies understood before the conflict ever began that neither Russia nor China would intervene, nor would they even make that decision together. Russia's strategic calculus is very different than China's, even where Iran is concerned. This time, though, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin agree. The loss of Iran may be unfortunate, but it's simply not worth going to war over. To understand why, we've got to start with Russia, where the world's most volatile nuclear strongman has chosen to back down from yet another fight. Sooner or later, every nation has to pick a side, and the 2020s have been a grimly educational experience for nations that chose to align themselves with Russia. Not long ago, the nation of Azerbaijan conquered the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh and put an end to its military rivalry with Armenia, paying zero mind to the Russian peacekeepers that Armenia thought it could depend on. At the end of 2024, when Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad stared down the barrel of a rebel offensive, Putin didn't offer Assad military support, but an apartment and a life under the careful watch of Russian handlers. When in early 2026, longtime partner Nicolas Maduro was spirited out of Venezuela by American special operators, Russia offered about the weakest condemnations possible and signaled that it would do nothing to change his fate. Even still, there was some reason to believe that Iran might be a special case. After all, this is a nation that's drawn much closer to Russia since its 2022 invasion of Ukraine, when most world nations have done the opposite. After Iran passed the technical specs for its one-way kamikaze drones to Russia, Moscow's interpretations on the drones have become a key asset in its ongoing war. In early 2020.
So they share nearly everything with each other, like when it comes to military and all of that. I would be questioning everything right now if I was the leader of Iran. I mean, he's the leader was the one that passed, no? But like, who did I ally up with? Like, we've been sharing all this military knowledge and all of this, and then they don't even come back me up when, like, things are happening. Interesting.
25, the two nations signed a comprehensive security partnership, signaling to the entire world that Russia-Iran relations weren't just positive, but constantly improving, and each nation has played a critical role in helping the other skirt Western sanctions. Just last year, when asked about how deep Russia's military collaboration with Iran really went, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed, quote, "The sky is the limit." When Iran's moment of truth finally came, well, we'll leave it to Politico author Eva Hartog to explain what happened next, quoting, "As Tehran was being pounded by US and Israeli bombs on Saturday morning, its top diplomat dialed Moscow's number. On the other end of the line, according to an official Russian statement, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov offered his Iranian counterpart sympathy and promised his verbal support."
Wow.
End quote. In the immediate aftermath of Israel and America's opening attack, Russia issued some of the most
verbal support. As Tehran was being pounded by US and Israeli bombs on Saturday morning, its top diplomat dialed Moscow's number. So they called Moscow and they were just like, hope you're gonna be good. We can verbally support you on the phone.
In the immediate aftermath of Israel and America's opening attack, Russia issued some of the most forceful condemnations at its disposal, railing against this unprovoked act of aggression against a sovereign nation and insisting that Trump and Netanyahu were, quote, plunging the Middle East into an abyss of uncontrolled escalation. Russia raised the specter of radiological warfare while simultaneously accusing Iran's enemies of using its nuclear program as false pretext for an attack. When Iranian state media confirmed that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei had been killed in the opening salvo, Vladimir Putin personally condemned his death as murder. Behind the scenes, however, it quickly became clear that Russia hadn't just chosen to sit on the sidelines, but that the decision hadn't been all that difficult. Vladimir Putin held a video conference with Russia's Security Council to discuss the situation, but didn't participate in or arrange any calls between the Russian and Iranian militaries. Putin didn't reach out to Iranian leaders, instead leaving the job for his foreign minister, and nor is Putin known to have privately threatened Western adversaries with the prospect of Russian intervention. Ukrainian government advisor Anton Gerashenko alleged, writing on X, that Iran did try to invoke clauses that it believed would pull Moscow to its defense, and requested that Russia activate S-400 missile defense systems as well as electronic warfare systems in Syria in order to interfere with Israeli and American military operations. Gerashenko's account is obviously a bit suspect, given his alignment with a nation currently being invaded by Russia, but if his account is accurate, then Russia responded to that request by deactivating its radar systems in Syria and dismissing Iran's request for intervention on a technicality. Whether or not that particular detail is accurate or not, the truth is that Russia had been laying the groundwork for non-intervention months before the US and Israel launched their strikes. Russia has
Interesting.
owed Iran military hardware for years that could have been a massive benefit to Iran in a conflict like this. Relatively advanced Su-35 air superiority fighters, of which Iran has 50 currently on order, and S-400 air defense systems that Iran's been desperate to acquire but that Russia has failed to provide. The military aid that Russia did send in advance was underwhelming at best. A handful of attack helicopters that were useless in the kind of war Israel and the US intended to fight, and an order of shoulder-fired missiles, of which a very small number may have been delivered by the
Why though? It's kind of like they're just like, okay, take this, get away. Interesting.
time Iran's adversaries launched their attack. There are currently no indications that Russia will try to provide Iran copies of its own Shahed 136 drone, mass-produced in Russia as the Jeren, even though Iran already knows how to use the drones and helped Russia set up its own production lines. So Russia isn't coming to Iran's defense, but we'd certainly forgive anybody watching this at home if you come away from that assessment a bit confused. After all, this is the same Vladimir Putin who's been invading his sovereign neighbor for 4 years and has positioned himself quite deliberately as an arch-enemy of the global West. But despite Putin's rhetoric, Russia's reasons not to intervene here are largely pragmatic, starting with the war in Ukraine. Russia simply doesn't have combat capacity to spare right now, and certainly
Yeah, this is what I thought as well, but that maybe they're using so many resources on the war with the Ukraine right now that they don't want to intervene in more.
not at a scale where it could rival the US and Israel in a conflict some 3,000 kilometers away from Moscow. Russia has neither the equipment nor the military infrastructure to battle for air superiority over Iran, and if it can't counter the US and Israel, it's best not to even try. On the ground, it lacks the troops to spare, with Western officials relating to war fronts recently that, as of now, Russian battlefield losses have exceeded recruitment numbers for 3 straight months. Across the globe, Russia is under mounting pressure from many angles at once, and it simply can't afford to risk even the appearance of allying with Iran, let alone a military overextension. It's
Makes
recently been
sense.
burned over Starlink, and it's watching as Ukraine is about to start European Union accession talks in the near future. It can't support Iran's wartime conduct as Iran has started to attack energy infrastructure and civilian targets across the Persian Gulf, especially in nations that Russia needs to keep close, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates. Even worse, Ukraine is already coming to those nations' aid, offering to send expert troops to assist with their air defense. Russia cannot afford to be on the other side of that equation, helping Iran bomb its rich and influential Gulf allies while Ukraine helps to defend them. Peer deep into the mind of Vladimir Putin, ignore all the other atrocious that's probably happening in there, and maybe you'll find real frustration that Russia must abandon Iran in a time of need. But the decision is already made, and for Russia, the alternatives are simply untenable. Now, just before we move on to China today, we've got to take a moment and highlight the place to go for even more information on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, as well as many other conflicts and geopolitical flashpoints that shape our world. Fronts.co is our team's written news website, premium subscriber service, and one-stop shop for all the in-depth analysis we can offer. Our core team works
And the regime that couldn't read the room.
with award-winning journalists and experts to provide multiple exclusive video episodes and articles every single week, in addition to the 8 free episodes we release. If Russia can't help Iran
Oh yeah, what's going on with China?
because of military and diplomatic limitations, then it's hard to see why the same logic would apply to China. After all, China isn't engaged in any foreign wars right now. It's got both the high-tech military equipment and the available troops to rush to Iran's aid, separated only by a few other partner nations in Central Asia. Not only that, but China regards Iran as a key strategic partner, officially and explicitly committing to, quote, safeguarding Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Like Russia, China's military has worked alongside Iran's for years in an escalating partnership. Iran received Chinese surface-to-air missiles just last year, and there's been talk of Iran receiving advanced Chinese fighter aircraft at some point in the future. Most important of all, each nation is economically vital to the other. These days, under heavy Western sanctions, some 90% of Iranian oil exports go to China, accounting for well over 1/10 of all the oil that China receives by sea. China buys its Iranian oil at a discount. It relies on Iran as a key part of its global Belt and Road Initiative, and it's agreed to pump some $400 billion worth of investment into Iran over the coming decades. But in China's case, it's likely that intervention over Iran was never a possibility that Beijing seriously considered. Take Iran out of the equation, and China's global strategic stance is simple. China does not go to war, ever, for anyone. In fact, China last engaged in an armed conflict in the 1970s, despite having ample reason to fight if it wanted to in the decades since. China doesn't put its troops at risk, it doesn't seek to prop up regimes by force, and has no desire to test itself against its global adversaries under any circumstances.
Interesting. But again, I'd be disappointed. Like, hello? Hello. But yeah, I saw also the Chinese president, I think, in a video saying that they will never send the first bomb, but if someone sends a bomb to them, they will go down. And so yeah, they kind of led to understand that they wouldn't start anything, but if they're dragged into it, then they'll fight.
Accept the circumstances of China's own choosing. But if that's China's rule number one on global affairs, then regular Warfront's viewers know China's rule number two. Do not, under any circumstances, touch China's shit. Right now, the US and Israel are carrying out a relentless bombing campaign against one of China's key economic partners, and if anything, that's a problem China would seem willing to go to war over. But much like Russia, China's response has been lukewarm at best. China condemned the US and Israel's actions. It condemned the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. It condemned the open attempt at regime change in a sovereign nation. That was about the end of it. Instead of drawing red lines, China is calling for military restraint and peace talks. And like Russia, there's no indication that China's engaged in military consultations with Iran over the current conflict. Western intelligence suggests that China did recently deliver kamikaze drones and air defense systems to Iran and is negotiating to supply hard-to-intercept anti-ship missiles, suggesting that China's at least doing more than Russia. But China's rule number two, don't touch China's shit, just doesn't seem to apply here. The reasons for this are twofold, starting with the fact that right now, not very much of China's is actually made it into Iran. Despite that price tag we mentioned earlier, $400 billion worth of future cooperation, less than 1% of that investment has actually made it to Iran. That's barely a rounding error for Beijing, and it's not nearly enough to get Beijing involved in a conflict.
Right.
Then there's Iranian oil, which is certainly important to Beijing.
It's just not worth it.
But the situation isn't black and white. The only country that delivers more oil to China than Iran is Saudi Arabia, and combined with the other Gulf states, China receives well past double Iran's contribution. Iran is deliberately targeting Gulf energy assets, including a refinery that supplies some 17% of Saudi Arabia's oil exports, and a Qatari liquefied natural gas terminal that supplies 20% of the world's LNG supply. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese nationals live in these countries, and China has poured incredible sums of money into regional partnerships there, just not with Iran. So, from China's perspective, who's really touching China's shit? Is it Washington and Jerusalem, who've mostly avoided Iranian energy targets, or is it Tehran, currently blowing Gulf energy installations into oblivion? From there, Iran's situation still manages to get worse because though its oil supply to China is technically under threat, China may not have much reason to worry. Venezuela is a really valuable test case here, and in Venezuela, when the United States came charging in, the oil kept on flowing out. Not as much of that oil went to China, but that's just politics, and China knows that the oil market needs customers and continuity more than Donald Trump needs to feel as if he's withholding something from Beijing. Add to all of that the fact that Beijing publicly opposes Iran's nuclear program, and Iran starts to look like an acceptable loss. As for China sending Iran its weaponry, that may be more to do with marketing. If Iran happens to score some hits, then China can use those successes to market its equipment to other countries, like it did with its missiles and fighter jets after Pakistan's 2025 conflict with India. In a way, Russia and China have delivered Iran the ultimate geopolitical insult. They don't hate Iran, they aren't condemning Iran, but at the end of the day, they just don't really care that much.
Yeah.
After decades of loyal partnership and recent years where Iran has clearly believed that its relationships with China and Russia were growing far deeper, Iran has been discarded. It's too inconvenient to defend. It isn't valuable enough to save, and for Moscow and for Beijing, it'll be easy enough to forget.
Yeah, this is kind of what I got from this. Like, it's not worth it. Like, it's just not worth it, you know?
Thank you for watching.
Because to have courtesy, they're like, you can take this, you can take, helping out a little bit, but from afar, but it's just not worth it to get into the conflict. Literally, they don't care enough. Like, they don't care enough. It's not that important to them, which is quite interesting, but also, I guess, a good thing. at this point. So either way, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this video. I really hope you found it informative. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!